Welcome to the Flat Track Factory on field trip with friend of the channel, Mike O'Neill. Hey Mike, thank you so much for having us back.
Good to have you here.
Normally we're down in the man cave, but for space reasons.
Yeah, it's getting a little crowded down there. Gonna have to get rid of some bikes maybe.
No.
Or bigger place, how about that?
Yeah, there you go, there you go. We have to do the Barbary Museum and rotate your stock out or something occasionally. We're going to talk about a viewer question today, and then maybe if I can, I'm going to try to get a bonus video where we're going to do the new YouTube Shorts, 60 seconds or less, do a tour of your shop, see if you can do like your shop in 60 seconds.
Ooh, it's a good challenge, but we'll try it.
Yeah. Viewer question we have today, and I love when you guys do this, put us on the spot, is what's the difference between a Rotax and a Speedway bike? So I happen to have friend of the channel, Mike O'Neill here, that can actually do that because he has a Speedway bike. He's raced a Speedway bike and he races flat track. He's a professional, degreed, certified engineer with race experience, all this sort of stuff. Mike, would you remind those of my viewers that have not seen you a little bit about your professional and your avocation?
Well, I've been racing amateur level many years and some semi-pro. Just wanted to keep it at that level, never really wanted to go to the pro level myself. But I do work on the Wally Brown racing team, kind of crew chief, mechanic, whatever it needs to be that weekend.
That's an AFT team that wins.
Yep,
wins.
Jesse Janis is running for us now on the KTM Twin.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then I did a little bit of Speedway. It was for fun, and I did it mostly to make me a better flat track racer.
Yeah. So we're really lucky that we have Mike. A lot of the smart guys like Mike are camera shy, but he's personable enough to let us come do this, and it's a big gift. So the question again is, what's the difference between a Rotax and a Speedway bike? And I sort of think that we might need to talk about what a Rotax is and what a Speedway bike is, and I'd just like you guys to hear it from somebody else. You've been watching me for years. You know that I'm a Rotax fanboy. Mike's ridden it and all kinds of other fire-breathing, open pro class singles and twins, 1949 Indian Arrows, Speedway bikes. So I'm going to try to shut up for a change. And Mike, would you field that question?
Certainly. Now the Rotax, it's good at a lot of different things, and it was derived from a production motorcycle, and therefore it has a multi-speed transmission in it, which makes it great for flat track because you're going to be running all types of sizes of tracks, anywhere from little bull rings up to half miles and even miles. And you know, it has to be good at a lot of things, including TT. So Rotax is a good all-around motorcycle, whereas a Speedway bike, that's an absolute thoroughbred. It is designed for one thing: short ovals, and they better be very smooth, and that's it. Now the engines for these do not come from production motorcycle. They are designed specifically for Speedway racing.
This particular one is of vintage, sort of, about the same time that the Rotax was originally raced, and has not really been developed, right? So it's more in its original format?
Yes, and when they were originally developed, they are highly optimized already. They're pretty radical. It's not like you're going to put a much more high lift, longer duration camshaft in there like that, because it's already got that in there. But it's, you know, it's hard to date some Speedway bikes. This one's about 1980, and this is actually a Westlake engine, and that's a very famous company. It goes back to Formula One days. Yeah.
So the Rotax that you're probably seeing now, we'll probably do some B-roll stuff, show you the bike that you're used to seeing on the channel is really not, it's not the same thing. It's about the original design is the same thing, but the bike you're used to seeing on the channel has been updated every year since 1982. So it's a 1982/2023. Where this particular one is it's quite beautiful in its own way, and to my novice eyes, it looks very similar to what I see on television.
It is. The newer ones have a sloped cylinder. It leans forward about 45 degrees, and that's to get the center of gravity lower. Now they're getting more traction out of the newer tires to keep the front end on the ground. But this was a fairly standard design for many years. World championships were won with this engine. But I think one thing that makes these bikes nice is their simplicity, and what makes it so elegant. It's a very minimalist approach. There is no transmission on this motorcycle. There's not even a neutral. The only way you can disengage drive is to pull the clutch in.
I'm going to stand out of the way a little bit so maybe you can point at some things. Some of the things that are curious to me is this thing has no brakes at all.
None. It's kind of like flat track was until about 1970 when they weren't allowed to have any brakes.
Now, my question would be, just from, like, you're coming up to the line and you came in 3 miles an hour too hot, why not just have a little tiny brake on it?
Because the rules say you can't have one. Okay. If you're asking for logic beyond that, I'm not sure there really is any.
Okay. I have no problem with that. That was just always wondering.
Yeah.
The front wheel to me looks like it really can't do a whole lot. It looks like a bicycle wheel almost to me compared to the flat track bike.
And compared to a flat track bike, you really don't use the front wheel that much. Where you might use the front wheel to scrub off speed on a flat track bike by turning it in, you really don't do that much. And actually, where a flat track bike has 50% of its weight on the front tire and about 50% on the rear, the Speedway bike has only about 40%. And when you're on the throttle, if that thing's touching the ground, it's only got a few pounds of force on it.
So it doesn't really need to do much.
It doesn't need to do much at all.
Where a flat track bike is much more like a road race bike, where a decent portion of the corner entry, I always make this motion. That's me showing everybody that I'm pushing that front end into the ground. You don't do that, or you don't do that on
Not as much, and you're doing scrubbing off speed with that, and you're doing some steering. And where you do quite a bit of steering with your right wrist on a flat track bike, you're doing even more of it with a Speedway bike.
So why is there no? One of the things that we do, and I teach flat trackers, is when you get to the gas, lift your foot up and put it on the peg, because you're really moving your center of gravity back because the peg is so far up and back. But the peg down here, it's a little nub way far forward. Explain that.
These bikes have quite a bit of weight towards the rear already. So we're on the flat track bike, you're making up for the fact that there's not as much weight on the back by sliding your weight back.
Yeah, sitting back up over here.
Right, you're not doing that. You don't have to do that as much on these types of bikes because they're already kind of heavy in the rear.
Okay, because this just looks to me, if I were to squat my booty on here for grip, it would just spin. I seem, looking at it, I want to sit on this piece.
Yeah.
But that's just not. That's the flat tracker.
And you really never really sit. That's why the seat's so small. You're standing all the time. But you will actually see when they're coming out of the turn, instead of sliding that leg back, if they're getting a lot of traction, the front end's coming up, they'll actually stick their leg forward to try to move the weight forward and keep the front end on the ground.
They accelerate so hard. I like to grab the bike with my thighs. How do you keep this thing? Because they accelerate violently, right?
Pretty much, but it's a different type surface too. It's a loose surface, so it has a different feel to it, and you're never really accelerating in a straight line real hard. Most of the time it's sideways, and you do use your knees somewhat to control it, but you don't get that grip between your knees like you do on a flat track bike.
I can hear the typing from the future coming back, and I'm reading it on the screen. The questions are going to be somewhere along the lines of, which one is faster, the Rotax or this?
It depends on the type of track. If you're on a good loose surface, this bike is set up better for it. In fact, I think it was about 1970.
So let's say the same track length, but it's set up the way this bike wants. This bike beats the Rotax every time.
If it was a short track and it was very smooth, because you have no rear suspension on this whatsoever.
Okay.
That's why those tracks are very well manicured. If it's a track set up for a Speedway bike, the Speedway bike will probably beat it every time.
Okay, so let's say the same length quarter-mile track, right? Yeah. Now we bank it a little bit and make it semi-tacky clay. Then which bike?
Then you're going to go with the Rotax. It's just the Rotax can take that type of track better. Like I said, this is set up very much for a loose surface.
So one of the most frustrating things I say on my channel is when I get questions is, it depends, right?
It depends. In fact, I think it was 1970, Barry Briggs came over from England and ran the short track in Daytona. And he had a 250 BSA engine in a Speedway frame, and he actually led the main until he got tired, because you have to stand, you can't sit. And after about 8 laps, he was worn out.
That's
a
great.
Flat track bike, you won't wear yourself out as quickly. But Speedway races are only 4 laps long.
All of them?
Yes. And that's it.
What's with the rubber band thing that's the starting thing? What is that all about?
Yes, they use a starting gate instead of a flag, and it makes absolutely sure that nobody leaves too early. It's a telltale. And
nobody looks at the middle of it for flexing reasons, right?
No, I mean you've got a starting gate, and there's a band that goes across, tape, they often call it, from one end to the other. And the ends are going to go up before the center reacts. So when they see the ends react, they're staring at that, they go.
And they race these, they call them heats, or what do they call them?
Yes, and what you do is there's only 4 riders on the track at a time, and it's only 4 laps at a time.
But how many racers are there at the event?
There's enough races so that you end up racing against every rider, every one of them. And first place in each heat gets 3 points, and second place gets 2, and third place gets 1, and fourth gets 0. And at the end of the night, I believe they usually take the 4 riders with the most points and have them do a runoff.
How much horsepower? I realize dynos are different, and I mean, please guys, don't get crazy about these numbers. What kind of horsepower does a Speedway bike make?
A good Westlake back then was somewhere between 55 and 60 horsepower. I think today, with the laydown Jawas, they're actually getting about 70 horsepower out of them.
Okay.
And if you think about it, if you get 60 horsepower out of this with a bike that only weighs 180 pounds, it's a pretty good ratio of weight to horsepower.
Yeah. It's frightening, I can imagine. Thrilling, frightening.
This is probably the cheapest speed you can buy for a motorcycle.
What would be the cost difference? Maybe currently versus, I guess currently it just depends how crazy you want to go, but back in the day, let's say when this bike's, and the Rotax first came out.
That's a good question. I don't know. I picked this bike up about 20 years ago for $1,000. And it had a broken valve spring, and I replaced the valve spring, and off we went. Now, I think if you buy a competitive Speedway bike in the U.S., not an absolute top-of-the-line model, but for $5,000, you can get a pretty nice, competitive, fairly modern bike.
Yeah, you're not going to buy anything on the flat track to be a competitive open class single for that.
Not to race on the pro level.
I mean, even a DTX bike, is retail just in the dirt bike form is $10,000 or $11,000.
Yep.
We haven't put any wheels or anything on it yet. So.
And it's a lot of hidden costs there.
Yeah. So then, of course, as you get sharper and sharper and sharper point of the tip of the grid, framed flat trackers like a Rotax, I mean, the numbers kind of get ridiculous. So. Tens of thousands of dollars for a framer. I'm sure if we ever if we got Wally to tell us what it costs to develop a modern framer, it's substantially more.
Well, the Indians, when they were new, were $50,000 a piece.
Yeah, and I understood that you got 0 spares with that.
That was just a motorcycle.
Yeah. So yeah, racing. What's the joke? What's the fastest way to become a millionaire in racing?
You start out with $2 million.
Yeah, exactly. The bikes look different here. You're standing over there now. Maybe we'll try to get a little bit of a different camera angle and show you some glaringly different geometries. Why is this looking like a chopper compared to this? What's going on here?
Well, this bike is really set up to go very sideways. In fact, if you look at how far you can turn the forks, you can almost go 90 degrees. And this more shallow head angle interacts with the trail and works for a setup that makes the bike more stable and controllable going sideways. It likes that. The flat track bike can go sideways and it likes that, but it doesn't like to go as much sideways. So we're looking at about a 15-degree head angle or fork angle on here, where on the flat track bike we're closer to 25 degrees. It's raked out a little more.
So this to me would be very quick steering and twitchy.
Very much so, and again, it's made for smaller, slower courses.
Okay. What are some of the other differences here that we're seeing from this angle here? The peg position is what I was pointing out before. If you'll notice here, this is actually the foot peg here, and the flat track bike, as you're all used to, is way back, would be behind the clutch on that.
And on the right side peg, it's very low to the ground. It's only about this far off the ground, and it's not. There's no pivot on it. It's fixed. And
let's turn the bike around and show.
So as you can see, the right foot peg is awfully close to the ground. There's no way you can make right turns with this thing. Highly optimized for left turns only on these bikes.
So this is why when I see them coming up to the line, I see them lean all the way over and lift the bike up off the ground?
Right. They'll go like this, and that way they can let the clutch out and let the rear wheel spin, and that way they don't burn up a clutch sitting there waiting for a start, especially if another rider's very slow getting up to the line.
Okay. So if you make a boo-boo and have to lean to the right on the racetrack at speed, you're going to have a bad day.
You're going to dig in the peg, and that can be ugly.
All right. What is this?
Oh, that's what I call a dead man switch. So basically what you do is you wrap this around your wrist, and if you come off, separate from the bike, you pulls this and kills the ignition, shuts the bike down, so it doesn't run over you. And often, you know, Speedway tracks, the crowd is right up against the wall there. It helps make sure the bike doesn't go flipping into the crowd too.
When I'm standing here, Mike, looking at this rear tire, I'm kind of terrified in a way that I didn't realize that this bike does not look like I would be able to corner, because there's no sidewall, there's no radius on the tire to get any lean angle. How does the bike corner then without any?
You're not running as much lean angle as you go through the turn. The idea, well, let's start with how you initiate a turn. As you start to turn in a little bit and you keep the throttle wide open, that spinning tire is going to try to go straight. So the bike gets sideways as the front goes left and the rear goes straight. And once you get very sideways, the way you're generating cornering force is really you're trying to point this tire towards the inside of the turn and throw dirt that way.
Got it. So that's why they stand up very straight, and you don't need a radiused tire.
Yeah. You're not leaning into the turn nearly as much as you are in a flat track
How
bike.
high is that that pipe off the ground?
Not very, but you know, again, you're not turning right.
Okay.
So, now you'll notice the newer bikes, they actually have a paddle on the back. It's a deflector behind the rear tire to keep the dirt from spraying up into the crowd and onto other riders.
I basically, at this point in my life, I don't race loose racetracks because I don't like my motorcycle torn up. And every once in a while, I'll mention, hey, why don't we put those little paddles on our flat track bike? And you would think I dropped a log in the punch bowl.
Well, flat track racers are very much traditionalists now, aren't they?
Aren't I a flat track racer? I don't know. I think we all should have a little paddle there and keep the racetrack on the racetrack, not on our motorcycles. But I've been losing that one for 10 years. Apparently there's the gas tank, which there's not gas in anyway, is very small.
Methanol fueled engine, and it holds only a few quarts. And the reason is the races are very short, 4 laps at a time. Even if you have to do a couple restarts, that's plenty of fuel to get you through a race.
Now, if we had to run methanol, because I know this because I've tried, our gas tank would be the size of a small car.
Yes, you go through about twice as much methanol as you do gasoline.
Yeah, and it's very heavy when you're carrying around that much fuel.
About 6.5 pounds a gallon.
Yeah. Okay. Carburetor looks very normal, basically.
Yep, it's a Del Orto, and which is an Italian carburetor, and I believe that's That's a magnesium body. So after every night of racing, you need to pull that off of there and get all that methanol out of it, so it doesn't eat away at the body. Dry it out completely.
Solid rear wheel looks cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's actually spokes. It's just a cover, and it helps keep the dirt out from the other bikes from that spray.
I'm going to adopt that, actually.
Yeah.
And there actually is there some sort of suspension or something here? It looks like a bicycle.
There is. It's very simple. It's just a steel tube on the outside with another steel tube connected to the axle on the inside that slides up. It slides inside of it. And we're not talking precision ground like the forks like this. We're talking pretty much steel tube, raw steel tube.
Okay.
And it's coated with grease. And there's a spring in here and then a rod which keeps it from overextending.
And the modern bikes stick to that sort of thing?
Modern bikes are using more of a leading link suspension.
Okay.
And we're
oh, that's right. Yeah, it looks very strange.
With a big rubber band. Okay. And what looks like basically a bicycle shock on it to dampen the motion. This actually has no shock. It depends on friction and that grease in there.
Now, why wouldn't they go to Olin's and get a tiny little fork like a flat track or a road race bike?
I think there's a few traditionalists in Speedway too.
Okay.
But I think what they have is a very light setup, and they know it.
Here's what I think. I think they're on the gas so damn hard that this part of the motorcycle is irrelevant.
There's a fair amount of that too.
Yeah. What do they say on that side, the other side of the pond? Their attachments are such that they can do such things.
Well,
large attachments.
It takes some of that as well. Yes.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is a real treat. I kind of got goosebumps just thinking about it. Think you could teach me how to do this?
If we can get a track that's not hard clay in North Carolina, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll work on them. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.